Kathy Marie Draper. Welcome to the show. Former El Paso County Sheriff's Deputy. I'm very honored to have you, and I would like to start this by asking you who you are and have you introduce yourself.
I am a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a grandmother of 14. Um, Lots of kids. I am one that has full faith and belonging to the good Lord above. I'm a Christian. I enjoy outdoor activity. My whole heart and a majority of my life has been my love for uh, my friends and family and law enforcement. I have been completely dedicated to the law enforcement side and firefighting side because my husband, for more years than I can count.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Michigan, northern Michigan. I went to school in the Frankfurt area, which is a beautiful, small, knit community, pretty much a residential or a seasonal community. Summers are great there, winters are empty. Uh, and then raised my children in the Traverse City area, the Grand Traverse Bay area, on the water.
When did you start in law enforcement?
I started taking the turn to law enforcement when the towers fell. Um, Back in September 11th of 2001, I was an orthopedic tech up at the hospital in the area I lived in. I was with a family, a gentleman that just had a double knee replacement, so I was with him, taking care of him after surgery. And he was sobbing because his son, who worked in the tower, was missing. Little emotional time. And it took hours and hours and hours before he found out that his son actually called off of work that day. And his son did not or was not a part of the Twin Towers falling. It was at that time and with the conversations with that guy that I decided to switch from the medical field to the law enforcement side. I knew I couldn't join the military because I had children. I had smaller children and I wanted to be a part of their lives, but I wanted to do something for our communities. And I felt law enforcement was the way. I started searching things out and I ended up helping Homeland Security, or what was Department of Transportation at the time, roll out TSA. I worked for TSA for 12, 13 years, grew with them, went to school, was promoted. I went to school, got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And through that process, I decided I wanted to go to Colorado, which is when my husband and I made the decision to get our youngest one off to the Marine Corps. And we started searching out jobs here in Michigan or in Colorado, and we moved.
Moved to Colorado. Okay. And your first job was with El Paso County Sheriff?
So it was actually I got a job right away with the post office. You know, it was government to government. I got a job with the post office right away. And while I was searching out jobs, I applied for CSPD and did some testing with them. I did looked into EPSCO, into El Paso County. When I saw that at that time they didn't have a hiring process going through, but they were hiring for reserve deputies. So I ended up moving from the post office to the Humane Society Animal Law Enforcement. So I got into that. And then I, at the same time, went through the process for El Paso County's Reserve Deputy Program, and started their academy February of 2018.
And what was the training like?
It was an academy. We started in February. We were done in July. Um, on top of our normal full-time jobs, we would go in the afternoons or sometimes on the weekends and do classroom, normal post-academy classroom. We did arrest control, we did firearms, we did the normal training, and we had to test out like the post test, the Colorado post test, except for it was the reserve post test. Similar, same same information, still had to have your legal and everything done for Colorado Post. And then we graduated in July.
Right after you finished and got qualified.
I was still working for the Humane Society and Animal Law Enforcement. And right after we graduated in July, I was then offered a position to do the Post Academy with El Paso County and go full time with them. So that just meant I would have to go through the full-time post academy, the 23 weeks, 22 weeks, post academy, and then would be post certified to work full time and get paid because as a reserve deputy, you don't get paid. That's free. So we did that. I signed papers. I left the Humane Society Animal Law Enforcement. Um, and on our first day, there was a group of us. On my first day, they had us sign papers because Sheriff Elder wanted it that he needed deputies inside the jail. So he was going to make our academy class the first academy class that was non-cert. So we ended up doing a 9-week non-cert academy. We were the first trial run to see how well it'd work if they could press in a whole academy in 9 weeks. So we did that. It was rough. It was a difficult one. We had a lot of information, the same information, but a lot of classroom information and the same arrest control and the same firearms time, all in that 9 weeks time, graduated, and then we all went to work in the jail. Uh, the way the process worked was Sheriff Elder needed employees in the jail because they were shorthanded deputies. So he had constant non-cert academies going. Once we were to a staffing number to where we had enough deputies in the jail to work, in a jail that holds, I believe, 2,200 inmates, as soon as we had enough deputies to staff the jail, then he would start rolling out post academies so that we could become post certified and could go on patrol. I worked in the jail for a few years. In 2021, I took my third academy with the sheriff's office. It was 22 weeks. Um, and it was a full post academy. We still did the riot control. We still did all the legal stuff. We did the arrest control program, the firearms. We did driving. We did a normal full post academy, and tested out for our posts and went back to work at the jail from there. We would then be called out to patrol depending on where we fell in line with our EIDs and our academies, our post academies and non-cert academies where we came in.
What's the ID?
Your employee identification number.
Okay, so basically based on seniority.
Yes. Yep.
So you you went through 3 academies,
I
basically.
did. I went through 3 academies. I did. Yep.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, I've never heard anybody go through that many. Okay, from what you had imagined to the reality, how did that work out for the jail and the patrol?
Um, I en I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working in the jail. I enjoyed working with the inmates. There's different sections in the jail, from, the medical section and the tower section where you have the inmates that work, in laundry in the kitchen and, those who go out to Best Way and work, the recycling plant. There's great things that happen inside the jail, and I enjoyed working with the inmates. I enjoyed working inside the jail a lot. As far as patrol, I was not out on patrol very long. before everything changed. But I enjoyed every single bit of it.
Take me back to July 2022 and tell me what happened.
So back in July of 2022, I was on patrol. I was in training with an amazing trainer. He's now a sergeant. We had worked a full week. We had a busy week. 13 plus calls a day. You know, we were very active. It was day shift. It was also our Friday when I received a phone call from IA, from Internal Affairs, stating that I needed to come into their office when I came into the office of the sheriff. So I did that. I went upstairs and spoke with it was Sergeant Vanderpool at the time, Lieutenant Vanderpool now, who immediately as soon as I walked in the doors, because I didn't know what was going on, I didn't think it was this. She said, "I need all your equipment." Gave me a box. Told me she wanted my gun, my badge, my taser. She wanted everything. Asked me where my rifle was, which was in the car. And then handed me a piece of paper stating that I was under IA investigation and I was going to be on administrative leave to be available 24/7 whenever they call me in. I need to come in. Yeah, she also told me to expect a appointment with Casey Campbell over at the county attorney's office for a matter of a Title VII discrimination. And I still had no idea what this was about. So I tried asking a question. When I tried asking a question, I was shut down immediately, told I needed to not ask, I needed to not argue, I just needed to hand over my stuff and to go home.
My God.
They then followed me out to the patrol vehicle where they took my rifle, and then drove me to my vehicle over at the jail, and I was off on my way home.
I can't even imagine how you felt.
It was horrible. You know, I had recently, in the end of June, sent off a letter to Keith Hilty with the internal affairs on a sergeant who was harassing me, Sergeant Ditmore. So I really thought it was about that. And as soon as I received this information, I knew something was completely wrong. I knew something was up. I just knew. There was nothing I had done. I don't work like that. I don't play games. And so I was really confused. And I just went home and waited.
What happened next?
It was about 2 weeks. I want to say 2 weeks. It might be less. I did contact the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, and I got an attorney right away because that's what you're supposed to do. And I spoke to him, and he couldn't make it to my meeting with Casey Campbell at the county attorney's office. So another attorney from he was a retired CSPD who became an attorney. He met me there, and sat in the meetings. They can't do anything for you, but they can sit in and listen. So we went into the meeting with Casey. Casey had some normal everyday communication back and forth, and then she said, "Okay, you know, did you by any chance ever ask Deputy Landis, who I was training, if Deputy Matos had a slat cut in her eyebrow to represent gang member activity or gang membership. And I said, no, I don't do that. I don't even know who Deputy Matos is. And so she took a picture of a young lady, dark hair, everyday jacket on, her hair was down, and she slid it across the table and she said, do you know who this is? And I said, absolutely not. I have no clue who that is. And she's in civilian, so I don't know that either. And she said, you don't know who this is? And I said, no. And she goes, this is Deputy Matos. And I said, I don't know who Deputy Matos is. And she said, did you never ask questions about her? And I said, no, I don't know who she is. Can't tell you anything. And she asked if I spoke to Landis at all about a deputy that was in his academy, and Deputy Matos. And I said, nope, because I don't do that. I just trained him. And she said, okay. And that was it. That was it. That was the gist of it. So I left with my attorney, and he said, yeah, this is just a hearsay. He said, she said, nothing. There's nothing here. And I said, okay. And so then I got a hold of me and said they wanted to interview me. And so they set a time for me to interview, which was, I think, 2 weeks later, a week later. We were into August, I believe, by this time. And I went in with Roth, my attorney, and Sergeant Vanderpool was the one interviewing. And she asked the same questions. She asked if I knew Deputy Matos, and I said, no, I don't know Deputy Matos. Who's this Deputy Matos? And she said Deputy Matos was in the academy with Deputy Landis, that it was stated that I asked Deputy Landis in a supply closet if Deputy Matos put a slash in her eyebrow for gang activity. And I said, I don't even know who Deputy Matos is. If she's new in the academy, then I may have seen her, but I don't know her. I don't know her. And I didn't have Deputy Landis that long. I had him a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. And she said, she then asked me, she said, when you were on patrol, you were fueling your gas pump on the day they called me in. And I said, yeah, me and the sergeant were, the guy that was training me, Sergeant Garcia, were. And she said, were you talking with another deputy? And I said, absolutely, I was. And she said, when you were talking with that other deputy, there was another deputy fueling the car over at Fleet. And I said, okay. No, I only knew of the one I was talking to. And that's wrong, deputy wrong. And she said, were you giving the other deputy dirty looks? And I said, what? There's not even another deputy over there. I didn't see no other deputy. I said, no, I looked around the parking lot because I always have my vision on every movement, especially on patrol. You're supposed to, you're trained that way. Hands, waist, face, they push it on you. And I went through 3 academies, so I think that was pressed in me enough. Hands, waist, face. So if I see somebody, I look them up and down. I know while we were fueling at the gas pump, there was a person walking by on the left because we were at Fleet where they work on all the vehicles. And there was a couple of vehicles that pulled in. One went to evidence and one went into the employee parking lot of the jail. It was 4:00 in the afternoon, so I'm facing west. I'm facing Pikes Peak, facing the sun. I said, nope, there's cameras right there. You can pull them up. I told Sergeant Vanderpool, you can pull these up. There's high def, brand new camera systems there. You can pull them up. I said, you can ask Sergeant Garcia. I said, I spoke with Deputy Ronk. I had a conversation with her, and she spoke about how excited she was to be able to eventually go back to patrol because she was on patrol with a different department. Had a whole conversation. It lasted maybe 2, 3 minutes, maybe at the max. And then Sergeant Garcia and I left. That was it. If there was somebody on the other side of the pumps, I had no clue of it. And if they would have pulled up the videos, they would have saw that. Well, Sergeant Vanderpool thought I was lying. I straight up told her, there's no way. No way. I would have saw somebody if I knew anybody, let alone I wouldn't have given her a dirty look. If I'm wearing sunglasses, I wear prescription sunglasses, and I was on patrol, so I would have had them on. There's no way. There's a billion reasons why I wouldn't have done that, and Sergeant Vanderpool wouldn't even listen to me, even to the point of I get Botox in my face. It doesn't move very much. There's there's a ton of things, and I tried to explain it. And I said, "There's just no way." So as our conversation went, she said, "Did you look her up and down?" And I said, "I didn't see nobody, so I couldn't have looked her up and down." She said, "Did you ask Deputy Ronk or make the statement to Deputy Ronk that it's a mess over in the jail and then look up Deputy Matos up and down?" I said, "I don't know who Deputy Matos is. I didn't know another deputy was there other than that other vehicle. And yeah, I did say it's a mess over there. We were talking about the jail and how bad it had been. Yes, I did say that the jail was a mess. That doesn't mean I said anybody working there was a mess. Specifically, a Deputy Matos, I don't know. So she spoke about that, and then she asked if Deputy Matos ever covered a ward for me. And I said, "I don't know Deputy Matos, so I can't tell you." And she said, "Well, she would have relieved you. Deputy Bradbury was training Deputy Matos." This is according to Vanderpool. She said that Bradbury and Matos came into the ward to take over my ward in the morning because I worked the night shift. If that would have happened, the way it would have been is I would have spoke with Bradbury. I would have handed off the keys and radio to Deputy Matos. I would have then logged the check. She would have then went and walked the check. So I wouldn't even have talked to her other than good morning, let alone know who she is. I would have logged the check as she walked it, or she would have logged into the computer and logged the check and walked it. And then I would have grabbed my stuff and left the building because I left right away. My husband worked the night shift or the morning shift, so he couldn't fully come into the building because we were swapping out our youngest child in the vehicle. So as soon as Deputy Bradbury or whoever came into my ward to relieve me, I left right away. I didn't sit around chit chat. I didn't get to know nobody. I didn't do any of that. And I explained that. There's if she did relieve my ward one time, it was stated, I wouldn't have had any clue. Wouldn't have had any clue. My priority is to get out to a car. Who wants to leave a child in a car in a jail parking lot where inmates are being released from the doors? No, we don't do that. We just get out of there. So then the interview was done. That was it of the interview. I went with my attorney and we went over to the attorney's office. And my attorney had spoke with Sergeant Vanderpool because I guess they're friends. And my attorney told us when we got to his office that Sergeant Vanderpool had stated that she has every single intention to fire me. It was already notated to my attorney that she had every intention to fire me. And that she thought I was lying, that she thought I did ask a question on a shaved eyebrow, um, with, and that I gave her a dirty look at the gas pumps. That's out of my hands. I can plead my case, I can do what I can. But that was it. And so I went home and I was talking with my husband and I told him, I like, maybe they'll listen, maybe they'll pull up the videos and maybe they'll do what they need to do to show that I didn't do anything wrong, you know? Um, talk to my witnesses. I have a billion witnesses that could, see what kind of character I am, that, I work really hard and I do extra duty all the time. I'm always helping raise money and, I was a good employee with a good future, I was a good face for the office. Um, and did a lot of work. Like I did a lot of work inside the facility. I found a lot of contraband. I just did a lot of work. And I was then called back for a second interview. Just before my attorney and I walked into the building, he told me that they expect me to come in there and lie. They expected me to come in there and state that, yes, I did that just to try and keep my job. And I said, but I can't do that. How am I going to hold my integrity, my morals, my person, my character any higher if I'm going to go in there and lie and state that I did something I didn't do? And I said, I can't do that. And he said, then you're going to fall on your sword. It's either go in there and lie or fall on your sword. Well, I'm going to have to fall on my sword then. He said, just think about it. Well, she already has intentions on firing me. So I went in there and it was the same thing. It was Sergeant Vanderpool. And she said, okay, so it's going to be the same questions. She gave me a piece of paper. She gave me a piece of paper ahead of time for me to sign stating that I was taking back my statements, that I was lying about my first interview and was taking back my statements. And I refused to sign it. I'm not going to sign that. And so then she asked me the same questions. She said, did you ask Deputy Landis if Deputy Matos had a slit in her eyebrow for gang-related activity? And I said, no, I don't even know I had no clue who Deputy Matos is. Still to that moment, I had no clue who Deputy Matos was. I didn't even search her up. During the whole wait period, I didn't even search her up, and I wanted to. I didn't even search her up. And she said, did you say anything that could have made Deputy Landis feel that you were referring to? And I said, no, I didn't ask Deputy Landis nothing. I didn't ask him about no other deputy in my ward. No, there's no way. Nope, not going to take it. And she asked me again if I gave Deputy Matos dirty looks at the fleet gas pumps while me and Sergeant Garcia and Deputy Ronk were there. And I said, nope, I did not. Didn't even know that was her standing there. Had no clue that she was over there. I looked through the parking lot and I again stated, please pull up the video. You'll see. You'll see. I had absolutely no clue that Deputy Matos was over there. And so that was it. That was it. Sergeant Vanderpool walked me and my attorney to the elevators, down to the elevators to walk us out of the building. And she said right in the elevators, and I'll never forget it, I have a really cute Coach purse. And she says, that's a really cute purse. It's too bad we could have been friends.
Did you ever even get to see the video? Did they ever show you any evidence?
So they didn't. They didn't. After those two interviews were done, my attorney again told me they're going to fire me. And they're going to blacklist me. They're going to stop me from ever working law enforcement again. Though my attorney, who's friends with Sergeant Vanderpool, told me this. He said she will absolutely make sure that you never work in law enforcement again.
That is shocking. What excuse did they use to get you fired?
They had some policy violations that of talking about another deputy, derogatory comments, derogatory statements towards another deputy, dishonesty, credibility. They hit me with 5 different policy violations for supposedly asking a question, he said, she said, and supposedly giving a dirty look. Now, when I did request right away to have a DAB, disciplinary action board meeting, so that I could have somebody represent me from the sheriff's office, and a panel of my peers, sergeants, lieutenants, commanders, whoever was going to sit in. And of course, Chris Strider, the county attorney, would be there, so that I could explain my case, so that I could fight for my job, basically, and hopefully that they would see that this was just crazy. I requested it. It was approved. It was set. I requested Sergeant Klug to represent me, and he stated he would. And then in the meantime, we got thinking, how am I going to prove that I didn't do this? Because they didn't have me do a polygraph, and it was in policy through El Paso County that if they request you take a polygraph or a CVSA, you must do it. So I'm like, they didn't request me to do a polygraph. They didn't pull, any videos or anything. They didn't talk to Sergeant Garcia because I asked them. They didn't talk to anybody. And I had just had my last annual review done, and it was impeccable. I had an amazing annual review done. So they didn't even talk to my sergeant who did my review. Yeah. And so I got thinking, we ended up calling Scott, and I asked him, I'm like, I need a polygraph. Is that something you can do? He's part of the FOP. I was in touch then at that point with a different attorney because I got rid of Jack Roth. If he's friends with Vanderpool and he's trying to get me to lie, then he's not a good attorney. I didn't like that at all. So I ended up going with Frontline Law up in Denver, who FOP covered for me. And she then spoke with Scott, and they hooked up a polygraph for me. I went in the day before my DAB and no, it was after the DAB, I'm sorry. Just before I spoke with the sheriff, I ended up having the polygraph done. So I guess I should back up a step. I had the DAB. When I had the DAB, my attorney from Frontline Law came down with me, and she had wrote some stuff up, but I had wrote up my own DAB argument, my own courtroom argument, if you want to say, explaining, exactly who I was, what all I've done through my career with El Paso County, the steps that I had just went through with the interviews, and that, I'm a really good person and a really great deputy. I would never do this. And if the video was pulled, if my witnesses were questioned, they would see this. And at this point, the person that did ask this question about Deputy Matos was already interviewed and already stated that they had asked the question. It should no longer have been on me.
Yes, it should.
Right. So, that was all part of my DAB. I had no involvement in it. I had absolutely no involvement in it.
How do they explain that? How was the rationale?
So there wasn't any other explanation other than I had to have known that these questions were being asked. I had to have asked Deputy Landis, and I had to have known that the other person asked it. That there had to have been communication between the two of us to ask Deputy Landis this. They just straight up were reaching. They were reaching so far. it was obvious nothing I did. And they still hit me with lying about it. They still hit me with, derogatory comments towards a deputy that I didn't even know existed. The day before my dab, I received an email in the afternoon from Chris Strider that stated if I wanted a copy of my IA investigation, I could request one before my dab. That would have given me, like, I think it was like 3 hours or 2 hours to even notify IA to get the IA report before my dab that morning. It was impossible. They didn't even get me time to do that. I did eventually get the IA report though. Um, and so I went into my dab and I said that, and I spoke about the cameras and the dab. Everybody that was on the dab board asked Sergeant Vanderpool about the video, did we pull video? And she said, the video's not working. We weren't able to see anything off it. And I said immediately, it's a brand new high definition system you can see from the jail all the way over to the fleet gas pumps on it. Brand new system. The county just paid a lot of money to have that brand new system installed. And so then I spoke through my dab about my annual performance and how great it was. And I read off lines on there from my sergeant about, the things that they see from me and all the help I give all the other deputies. And, I'm one of knowledge. And she said, who did you get that from? And I told her it was Sergeant Bond. And she said, I didn't see that, but it was right there. It was, where did my evaluation go if I have it in my hand, signed by my sergeants? But she didn't even pull that up. She refused to pull any of that up.
Okay. And the polygraph that you mentioned, did you have it done so before your dab?
No, it was after the dab. When I went through my dab, everybody on the board voted to have me terminated. Which I didn't understand at all. It made absolutely no sense to me how now these people I looked at the dab held people that I looked up to. Um, it everybody on that dab board I thought were amazing people, and they didn't even see it. You know what I mean? They didn't even save something they knew was wrong. And they all voted to terminate me. So then my next step was to have a meeting with the sheriff. So immediately I requested to have a meeting with the sheriff. And at this point, I'm devastated. Like I can't even sleep at night. I was sick to my stomach. I was getting sick all the time. I couldn't eat. I was going through the normal process. And now terrified, because this is our life. This is money. We're adopting a child. We're going through a whole bunch of different stuff, and the whole thing is just crashing down on us. Our household, our bills, how are we going to make it? Everything. And so then I requested a meeting with the sheriff. I'm like, this is my last thing. I've always gotten along with the sheriff. I talked to the sheriff. I've goofed around with the sheriff. I've gone through 3 academies, so I've shaken his hand and got 3 badges from that man. My last academy, I got awards for running, 1 of 3, running the most and doing all sorts of stuff. So I thought, he'll listen. He'll listen. And that's when Scott arranged it with my attorney, and the FOP paid for it. It's a lot of money. And I had the polygraph done the day before the dab, or the day before the meeting with the sheriff. As I was leaving, I did the polygraph. As I was leaving the polygraph, I got a call from Sergeant Vanderpool, and she said, "Since you're being terminated, you need to bring all your stuff in the morning. I want all your equipment, all your uniforms, everything you need to bring it all in." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, I'm being terminated, but I still have a chance? Do I have a chance?" Now I started getting sick all over again. She just told me I'm being terminated, but I thought I had a opportunity to talk with the sheriff and the undersheriff. So it was Sheriff Elder and Sheriff Roybal, or Undersheriff Roybal at the time. And so I went there in the morning, and I had all my stuff, and she came right down. I gave it to her. And she gave me a piece of paper that stated the termination. That the board, everybody decided I was to be terminated. And I gave it to my attorney now in confusion, like, what's the sense in even going to talk to the sheriff? I just got my termination papers. And I went upstairs, and they told me my attorney couldn't come with me. And my attorney was confused on that too. She's like, "Wait a minute, I am representing her, but I'm not talking." Like, she knew she couldn't talk. She knew she couldn't do nothing but listen. And they said, "Nope, you can't come up at all." So I had to go up myself. So I said, "Okay." And I took all my polygraph papers with me, and Sergeant Vanderpool escorted me upstairs. She asked me, what the papers were, and I said, "It's my polygraph." And she was shocked. I didn't say nothing else to her. And I went in, and they sat me down on one side of the room, a great big board office. They sat me down one side of the room. Under Sheriff Roybal, or Sheriff Roybal now, was to the right of me, the only one on the right side of the table. Across from me was Chris Strider, the attorney for the county, Sergeant Vanderpool, Lieutenant Vidmar, Hilty. He was a staff member. He used to be sheriff's deputy, I believe, and he went to citizen. And Sheriff Elder. And Sheriff Elder stated that they had recommended my termination if I had anything else to say. That was it. And I said, "Well, I brought with me, just wanted to let you know, I brought with me a polygraph I had done, because it wasn't requested." I said, "But I have to tell you, I didn't do this. I absolutely didn't ask about another deputy if she shaved a slit in her eyebrow, and I didn't give her a dirty look at a gas pump." I felt like I was in elementary school for a minute. And I looked at under Sheriff Roybal, and I explained to him, "I've always supported you guys. I've always stood up for you guys. I have always supported the office. I've represented the office. I do extra duty for the office. I'm, always on time. I'm never late. I, went through a whole gamut of everything I've done for them, including my 3 academies. And later in life, because I'm not young, I went through 3 academies, and I didn't do it." I said, I wouldn't do this to your name, because I know everything I do is your face. That's how sheriff's deputies are supposed to act. Everything we do represents the county and the sheriff, and we cannot act in such a way that makes the sheriff and the county look bad or ashamed. We don't do that. And so I gave him the polygraph. I said, "I don't know what more you want from me, other than I didn't do this." I said, this other person already stated they did that. That was them. It wasn't me. I had nothing to do with this. And let alone at the very end, I said, and after reading the IA investigation, it also stated that they didn't know about the other person that had asked the question. That Deputy Matos didn't know there was somebody else that asked the question, not me. She thought it was coming from me instead of that other person. So she didn't even know for sure it was me. She just heard a name and thought it was me. So that took about 10 minutes. I said, "I'm not gonna tell you I did something I didn't do. I'm not gonna lie and beg you more than I have. I had nothing to do with this." And so they said, "Okay, we're gonna talk. Go ahead and wait out." Hilty went and escorted me out into the lobby where the sheriff's secretary is, and I was sitting out there for about another 5 minutes. And I was staring out the window, trying not to cry. I was staring out the window, and Hilty came up to me and he said, "I'm really sorry you're going through this." I said, "Me too. Me too." I thought me and Hilty got along too. Uh, And that's when Sergeant Vanderpool came out, handed me my termination papers, and said, "I'll escort you out now." That was it.
Wow. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about what was supposedly said about Matos and the fact that saying something like that, and I'm not gonna, go into much detail other than to say there's a certain legal right and obligation that people would have to raise such an issue with someone in the police department who, you know, Matos or whoever
Yeah.
could it could be that could have family members who are incarcerated. Not to say that Matos did anything wrong, by the way,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but
Right.
but if you have somebody in the system, I mean, isn't it your legal obligation to bring that up?
So it is. We know being in law enforcement that sometimes law enforcement can be on the wrong side of the law. We've had examples of sheriff's deputies who brought drugs into the jail, and he ended up doing a few years in prison for it. He was bringing them in KFC mashed potatoes. Like, we know that things like that happen. We know that we have to watch behaviors too. And through this whole process, we found that uh, Deputy Matos, it was brought to this other person's attention that Deputy Matos, when she was on her first day of the academy, she had um, introduced herself, because that's what you have to do at the first day academy. You introduce yourself, you state your name, where you come from, why you're there, basically a little rundown on yourself, very little. And the audience are the commanders and lieutenants and the sheriff and undersheriff as you're introducing yourself. It was brought to this other person's attention that because he was training somebody from her academy, that when she introduced herself, her desires to be a sheriff's deputy were true, that her uh, family and her brother are Sereno gang members, and that her brother died in Sereno gang activity, and that the slit in her eyebrow was because he had died. That's what this other person was told. So then it was also brought to his attention that her child's father, so her ex-boyfriend or ex-husband, whoever he is, was also housed in one of the one of the jail wards. So then this other person, that's concerning, not that she would do anything wrong, because even if her family's gang members, doesn't mean that she can't make things better. It doesn't mean that she doesn't want things better in her life, that people can't change. Typically when you're born into a gang, you're born into a gang, and you're raised in a gang way. It doesn't mean that she doesn't want something better for herself or for her son, you know? So it's not a matter of that. Um, but you also have to be aware to make sure if her child's father is in a ward in the jail, then she needs to make sure she's not going into that ward. She shouldn't have any part to do with that ward, and it should be of concern if she is a Sereno, Should she be working as a sheriff's deputy in the El Paso County Jail?
Or at least noted so
Uh,
that
at
things are
least
kept
noted.
straight. Exactly. And I mean,
Correct.
good for her. She
Yep.
walked out of that and went on the other side. Good for
V
her,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But that doesn't I'm having a difficult time seeing how that rises to the level of a firing.
Right, right. I don't understand it either. I don't understand. So, could the person that heard the information have done something different? Yes. They could have not asked another deputy if she did that. 'Cause that's what that other person did. That other person then asked another deputy who was in her academy, did this really happen? Did she really stand up and state that her family's Serranos, that she has a slit in her eyebrow because of the Serrano death, you know? And instead of doing that, that other person could have went to a sergeant and said, "Hey, this was brought to my attention." Sure, that could have happened. Does It didn't involve me at all, and I never even heard about the thing. I never was told about it. I never was questioned about it. I was never asked a question about it. Nothing. So it was nothing I had even heard of, let alone been a part of, enough to even be fired for.
Yeah, and I mean, let's note the fact that they call you in, the or county attorney is sitting right there. You're not allowed to have your legal representation, right?
Right,
At all.
right. No.
So what happened with the polygraph? Didn't that scare them a little bit?
So it did. It shocked them that we even did it. I said, I just wanted to say I did have the polygraph. I have it right here. I passed the polygraph. I proved that I was not lying as much as I possibly can to show you guys, the sheriff and undersheriff, and to show you guys that I didn't do this. And it was then stated by Sheriff Elder that the El Paso County Sheriff's Office does not recognize polygraph, and he refused to look at it.
How did everybody treat you afterwards? I mean, were your friends still your friends?
Oh, a lot of them, so many. I cannot tell you how many people reached out to me. So many deputies and sergeants and commanders reached out to me. Even a couple came and visited me because they couldn't believe what was going on again. They weren't shocked. None of them were shocked that this happened, but they were afraid to talk because they know that this happens. They were afraid to say anything. They were afraid to, a couple of them were afraid to be seen with me because they knew that they would be retaliated on. Um, it was amazing to see the amount of people who have fear of the sheriff's office. Still to this day. It's been just a couple years, and they're still to this day afraid of what would happen. And now that Sergeant Vanderpool's working in the jail deputies are nervous, to say the least.
What do you think brought this on where you had a big old red target on your back?
Um, this had absolutely everything to do with Sergeant Ditmore. I made a complaint about Sergeant Ditmore and some constant harassment that she gave me over 4 months, constantly trying to write me up, uh, doing everything she could to get paper on me, and even trying to get me to lie on a report, which I put in the report that she wanted me to lie, even trying to upset the inmates in my wards in the midnight shift. She would come in and upset the inmates in my wards and then leave. It was nonstop harassment, and the only reason I even reported the harassment is because another sergeant told me I should. It was another sergeant who said, "You need to get a hold of IA and report this."
Where did I go?
So I I was nervous about putting anything down because that's just not who I am. But I also am not dumb. I called Hilty over in IA, and I spoke to him first, and he was with Lieutenant Vidmar. We did a phone call. Sorry, we did a phone call, and they were on speakerphone, and I just explained the situation. Um, I explained everything and step by step that was happening, that I was being wrote up for things that I was told about days prior or days after. Um, and that it was consistent. It was constant. It was making a hostile work environment for me every single day. And so Hilty and Vidmar said, do me a favor, put it in writing and send it over to us. We will then, yeah, yeah, I did. I did. It took me maybe a week to send it over because I was nervous about even sending it over. I wrote it up. It was 2 pages long of dated everything she was doing to include the codes that I had an award and what happened and where she wanted me to lie on a report, the dates that she was upsetting my wards, the times that she was trying to write me up for not validating my time cards, and that it was literally every day. I remember sitting at a desk with one of the sergeants, and she was explaining to me what sergeants do on a daily, and we were going through blue teams, and so she was training me sergeant duties. She knew that my goal was to become sergeant. She was training me sergeant duties, and we literally were side by side, and we're going through blue teams, and we're doing different things, and um, we tried. We could feel Sergeant Ditmore standing behind us. We tried so hard to avoid it, and finally we were done. And there were a whole bunch of cookies that were delivered for Lieutenant Cedar's birthday. His wife delivered a bunch of crumble cookies, and we went and we kind of slid over to the cookie area, and Ditmore followed us, and she was behind us, and she cleared her throat and she said, I have paperwork for you. I need to talk to you. And it was just another thing. And, that other sergeant was just shaking her head the whole time. Like she didn't say anything, which she shouldn't have, but she also is the one who came to my ward and said, you got to do something about this.
So, talk to me about the time card issue.
So the time card, we had to certify our time card at the end of our 2 weeks. If our last day was on a Friday, we'd have to do it Friday when we were done with work. When you work in the jail facility, you have to do it on you had to do it on the computers. So you would have to uh, clock out because you can't certify it without being clocked out. So you had to clock out, then go in and certify your time card. But if anything was wrong, then you had to go to the sergeant's office and you had to have the sergeants fix everything that was wrong or anything that was wrong, and then go to a computer and certify it.
So you go in like to a locker at the beginning, get your stuff, get your gear, get keys, get all that. Doesn't that count as time work?
So once you get your gear and stuff, no, not until you clock in. You clock in and you go to briefing. So you have to go clock in and then you go through security and go to briefing, and then you go up to your wards. In order to validate your time cards, you have to clock out. So you either have to go clock out in your ward, go downstairs, turn in your keys, go to your sergeants, validate your time card, go turn in your keys, go talk to your sergeants if you need anything done, turn in any of your equipment, your radios in the sergeant's office, and then go through the doors in order to go out. Or if you clocked out at the back door, because there's one by the locker room, then you would have to clock out, go back in through the 2 doors to go into the sergeant's office to log onto a computer so you can validate your time card. You couldn't do it at the time card like you could. You had to do it off the clock. So there's a whole process. So when I was getting in trouble for it, it was in June that I received an email and it said, a list of people, you guys didn't validate your time cards. Next time you do it, you'll be wrote up. Disciplinary actions and write-ups. And I received that from Ditmore, and there was like a few of us. There was a handful of us on that email. And that was because I had missed a time clock validation or a time card validation in May because my little one had a state pageant in Denver, in Westminster. So I was trying to hurry up and get up there because I worked the night shift and we had to be out there right away. And so I went and I called them. As soon as I left and realized I didn't validate it, I called my sergeants and I said, hey, I screwed up. I didn't validate my time card. I'm going to be out of town all weekend. Taken care of. That was the only time I didn't validate my time card. And then the next And then Ditmore sent me that email stating that I was going to be disciplined if it happened again. So then my next time card was really wrong because I was in rifle training. It was holiday pay, and we don't have time clocks at the shooting range. So I had to work with Sergeant Doucette to have my time card fixed, which I have the emails on. And so he worked with me back and forth, and then I ended up going down to the office after I got out done with work, and we fixed my time card and I validated it right with Sergeant Doucette. So it was done. Um, and then Sergeant Ditmore tried writing me up for that. And I explained to her, I said, it was validated. Sergeant Doucette helped me. And she said, well, I'll have to speak to him. So she spoke to him and he told her that he helped me fix my time card. And I was able to get into the time card stuff on Chronos, and pulled up that Sergeant Bonk had got in to my time card that next morning at 8 a.m. And so I printed that out and I went and took it to Sergeant Ditmore the next day because she called me down, tried writing me up again. And I gave it to her and I said, look, it was validated. It showed it was validated. And it also showed that Sergeant Bonk got into it and opened it up at 8 a.m. So then she didn't write me up for that one. That was 2 days in a row. And then the next day, again, she pulled me down to write me up. And she said, last January, you didn't validate your time card. And she tried writing me up for that.
So she was looking into your times to try to find an excuse of something you'd missed.
Absolutely, she was. Absolutely, she was.
But that never came up during your evaluation.
No, my annual evaluation was the best one I had ever had in a lifetime.
They always do
Yeah,
this. They come back and sometimes they even go as far as getting testimony that is false against
yeah,
people. Yeah. With
yeah.
promises of, I'll make sure you get promoted even.
Mhm.
It's insane.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So that is what put the big red dot on you.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And it was nonstop. It was nonstop. There was a situation with a nurse that was assaulted in a ward. Um, the deputy in that ward had med pass in there, and he had med pass for a inmate who was a 2 deputy. And he decided to open the door without a second deputy, and that inmate ended up assaulting a nurse. So it should have been a 2 deputy. That door never should have been opened. And that was negligent. That was huge on that nurse. It was a traveling nurse who, came to our facility to help us out and ended up getting assaulted. Um, and so then they had stated, you got to basically a reminder. You need to be with your nurses. You can't leave your nurses alone. We went over examples and briefing about, have them sit behind the desk. They can't be with inmates as you walk away. Um, and that was on the 20th of June. Um, I had a ward on the 19th, the 20th, 21st. It was open bay ward. It was a working ward. A lot of the girls go to work in laundry and stuff. It was the well-behaved ward for the facility. Doesn't mean things don't happen, but it was a better behaved ward of females. And I made sure when I did my 30-minute checks, because med pass usually took more than 30 minutes, that the nurse went and sat or stood behind my desk, and I had the 1 or 2 inmates at the farthest table back behind. So that there wasn't anything. I ran the check real quick, and I came down. The checks maybe take a minute. Open bays, you just walk right on by them. You don't check inside cells. You just look in the bays. And so then Ditmore again tried writing me up, and it was, you did this and this on the 19th and the 20th by leaving the nurse alone on the 19th and 20th when you were told on the 20th and 21st not to. So she was writing me up for something before I was told not to do exactly what I was told to do.
She's just trying to get a paper trail on you.
Oh, absolutely. So she was going to write me up for the 19th because I was told on the 20th not to do it in the future, I guess, or the past. I don't know. But
Wow, I'm sorry. This is not funny.
it's funny. It's actually ridiculous.
It
It's
is.
actually ridiculous. That a person would even be willing to put that on paper, it's almost embarrassing. Did you give a dirty look?
Oh my
How
God.
dare you do something the day before I told you not to do it?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, let's move on to what happened afterwards. So now you're fired. What do you do?
Yeah, so after I was terminated, I filed for unemployment, which El Paso County denied. The county did. I then, appealed it. I fought it. Absolutely, I'm not in the wrong here, and I'm going to fight this. So the FOP attorney couldn't help me. She could assist me, with, things to do, but she couldn't do the court hearings with me. That's not what FOP pays for.
And they do not have protections for union. The FOP is not a union. It does
No,
not give law enforcement the same legal protections.
no, no, no. It's a support group almost. Yeah. And so I did the unemployment hearing. It was Chris Strider, county attorney, Sergeant Vanderpool, Lieutenant Vidmar, that came to the court hearing. And me. It was just me. And I had my witness, which was the person who did the wrong, the person that asked the question. So I was able to question Sergeant Vanderpool. I was able to question Lieutenant Vidmar. I was able to object Strider's statements, comments. And after that was a pretty lengthy court hearing. It was nerve-wracking, but I did it.
Good for you.
I'd make a good attorney, I think. But anyways, when you're honest, you're honest. And when you have the proof of it, you just have it. And so
Were you able to introduce your polygraph?
I was able to introduce my polygraph, and Chris Strider, the county attorney, made it very known that Scott was terminated and criminally charged from El Paso and wrongdoings he did with polygraph and using El Paso County equipment, I believe.
Can you do me a favor and please explain to people who Scott is?
Scott, when I started with the Reserve Academy in 2018, in February of 2018, I started the same week that Scott was shot and Deputy Flick was killed. I just
Talking
got
about
goose.
Scott Stone,
Yep, yep.
who lives with a bullet to this day and no
He
benefits.
does. He does live with a bullet to this day. So after he was shot, obviously he had some recovering to do. The sheriff's office found some things for him to do, and then the Sheriff Elder, uh, who has in policy that you can use polygraph and CVSA, sent Scott Stone to polygraph school. He wanted to use Sheriff Elder wanted to use polygraphs, so he sent Scott Stone to polygraph school to have him run polygraph for El Paso County. The sheriff's office kind of pushed him out, forced him out, and then refused to cover him now. I believe they're not even covering, well, they might be covering him, but I think medically they took him off. They said they don't have any job for him to do, and basically got rid of him.
Yeah, I don't think they cover him in any way, to be honest with you. But yeah, yeah, that is the thank you that the sheriff's office gave
Yeah.
to him for what he went through.
Right, right. I believe the bullets lodged in the back hip area. They can't remove it. He has mobility issues, physical therapy, like it's a pain, literally a pain, constant for him. And, I can only imagine as he gets older, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, because he's a very young guy.
Well, he is. He's a great man.
Yeah, so they wanted to say that the polygraph examiner had issues. Oh my god.
Yeah. Chris Strider, tried using because they got rid of Scott, that they shouldn't believe in the truthfulness of my polygraph, even though the polygraph's read a certain way.
That's right. They can't read it wrong. Okay.
No,
So, and
no.
then isn't there always two people reading it too?
I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in polygraph. Yeah.
Okay. So what happened?
Yeah, I absolutely fought it. The judge did ask Chris Strider if Deputy Matos and Deputy Landis and Deputy Ronk were all involved in this. Why weren't they there to testify? They didn't bring none of the witnesses to testify. They didn't bring nobody. It was just them and me. And they simply stated that they couldn't get a hold of them, and Deputy Landis had prior engagements or something ridiculous. And
Couldn't get a hold of them for a hearing for really?
yeah, yeah. I also used, because I had received information from uh, oh the IA file on the other person, so I had the witness, so I was able to use that witness to state on, did we have communication about any of this, which we hadn't. We had never talked about it, and why we had never talked about it. And so I had my witness and me, and at the end, it took almost a year. At the end, the judge came back, and it is the sitting judge who does that. The judge came back with the finding that I was not responsible for my termination, that I should receive full benefits. And then she agreed and used my polygraph. So Chris Strider then filed an appeal. They then appealed my winning, which then held my money back longer. And the appeals, you don't have another court room event. You don't have another hearing. On an appeal, what happens is a panel of sitting judges, real sitting judges, a panel of them come together, they review everything, and then they can ask questions or make a decision. They review whether the first judge seem to side one way or the other due to favoritism or due to whatever. And they came back at the end of the 1 year that they hold what the first judge states, that I was not responsible for my termination.
So you fit them in court.
It took literally a year from the time I was released to the time I received my unemployment. It took 1 year.
All this time you had no money, and this is what they do. They bank on squeezing people.
Yeah, they didn't care. They didn't care. They had no cares in the world, not about me or my family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
What happened with your post?
So right at the end of that year, it took a year for posts to go through because they're so backlogged. With some changes that they had had, they're so backlogged on, reviewing people's posts. Right after I was terminated, Lieutenant Vidmar sent out a Form 13 to Colorado Post stating that I was terminated due to credibility and wanted my post removed due to credibility. And it was the new law that had come out. And so Post reviewed everything. They received the information from me and my attorneys, and everything we gave them, because we gave them everything. And they sent Sheriff Roybal, because now it was Sheriff Roybal, a letter stating that Form 13 and the information they received does not classify as a credibility issue. It does not qualify to remove my post. My post was to stay. Sheriff Roybal then should have removed the credibility from my Colorado post and never has. Still to this day hasn't.
Were you able to use that new HB 251136 to file an appeal?
I did file an appeal and I spoke with Post. I talked to Post a few times now. And they said, again, because it's a new one, they're so backlogged, it's going to be a year and a half for that. As of right now, my post did just lapse. I could reapply and have my post renewed. It's about $600, 500 and some dollars. But the appeal's still there, regardless. It doesn't matter if I renew my post or not. That credibility shouldn't be there. It does say on my post that it's a district for DA's office who put it on there. We made contact to the DA. I am not Brady listed. Was never Brady listed. The investigators over at the DA's office, spoke with two of them. One emailed me back, or emailed us back, and stated that they can't remove those. It's the sheriff's office that needs to remove those. After Sheriff Roybal got into office, I did have a meeting with him. He agreed to have a meeting with me, so I met him one morning at his office, and I gave him all my information, to include a message I received from a Miss Matos on Facebook. The meeting I had with him, I explained the polygraph, I explained all the information, and that I had nothing to do with it. And I explained the Colorado Post and how I need that removed because it has prevented me from getting jobs. He listened. He stated that he would contact the DA's office and see what they could do, what was going on, and he would get back with me. He did call me back. He left me a message. I still have that message, and stated that he reached out to the DA's office, that they are not the ones that can remove it, that he can't get it removed, that I would have to contact the DA's office.
When the DA's office is telling you it's him,
It
and the
is
other
him.
one is telling you, of course it is. Yeah, of
Yeah, it
course it
is
is.
him, and it is and Post even said the same thing as Sheriff Roybal. He's the one that can remove it, and Post already told them the information they received does not hit credibility on me. It
But
shouldn't be
this,
there.
yeah, this HB 251136, when your turn comes, then he will have to prove.
So when I spoke to Post about that, yes, he will have to state about the credibility. He'll have to speak about the credibility. But she stated, the lady from Post, she stated that when they see a report, when they get a report on a deputy, and this report states she was terminated due to IA investigation, lying, and was terminated, and that's all the information they get, that's all the information they have to back. So this new bill doesn't quite cover exactly what it needs to. Now, if they would have put detail in there about she stated Deputy Matos had a slit in her eyebrow and this and that, then they would have to back that up or prove that. But they didn't put any of that information in there. They knew what they were doing. They only put that I had a failed IA investigation for credibility.
Is this affecting you getting other positions in law enforcement,
Oh,
even if you explain?
it is. It is. I applied for Pueblo Sheriff's Office right away. As soon, I didn't want to live and work in the same place, but I applied for Pueblo Sheriff's Office right away, and I was called in for an interview right away. It was two sheriff's deputies, one who does the hiring and a sheriff's deputy, and myself, and we had a great conversation. It was one of two interviews. We had a great conversation, and then she asked me, she said, "Why were you terminated from El Paso County?" And I told her the whole thing. Deputy Matos, the slot, the he said, she said, the polygraph. I went through it all. And she said, "But that's not what El Paso County is telling us." And I was confused. I said, "I have all the paperwork. Like, this is everything right here." And they said, "No. El Paso County is telling us that you were fired because you posted inmates' pictures on Facebook." What? I have the IA report. I have everything. And she said, "Well, I need all of it because I need to show it to the sheriff."
So they called and they talked to them and they told them some extra lie.
They told them I was terminated because I posted inmates' pictures on Facebook. And I had to prove to the sheriff of Pueblo that I didn't do that. So from there, they went hire me. They thanked me for my time. And they were really nice. They were great. So then I didn't want to apply for DOC, but I did just because it's a job and I need money. I need to pay my bills. They just took $100,000 a year from me, or $85,000 a year from me. And so I applied for DOC, and I received a letter from DOC back immediately saying I was banned for a lifetime. They didn't even talk to me. They said I was banned for a lifetime. And that was before I was even found not responsible for my termination. And they told me there's no way to appeal it.
And the only way to actually get something back would be to bring a lawsuit, which would, I imagine, take quite a bit of money.
It would take a lot of money. Lawsuits can take up to, I think they said $55,000. It could take
Yeah.
a lot of, and it's a crime in the state of Colorado to blacklist people, and that's exactly what they did. The county of El Paso and the sheriff's office have blacklisted me, and it's a crime. It was a crime for Lieutenant Vidmar to sign that paper because it says that under penalty of perjury, and he signed it anyways. He knew I didn't lie. It was the level of proof.
You have the capacity to file a tort against government officials who harm you. and I'm not a lawyer, not giving legal advice, but this is, a Google search. Um, but you only have 6 months from the incident. And
Yeah.
because most people are going through the IA and, doing all this, hoping to keep their jobs, they bank on
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And by that time, it is too late for you to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So, what are you doing today?
Uh, I'm teaching. I have a substitute teacher's license through the state of Colorado. I've had it for 3 years now. I just renewed it for another 3 years. Um, yeah, so I'm
That's
teaching.
amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep. I work all
That
next week with a middle school art class.
that is fantastic and way less stressful, hopefully.
I don't know about that.
I know
Those
nothing.
kids will give you a run for your money.
Oh, yeah, they will.
Yep.
But you have lots of experience with that.
I
And
do.
you have a lot of children in your family, so that's great.
We do. We do. On top of our children, we've helped raise about 26 altogether.
Oh my God, Kathy,
Yeah.
that is very impressive. You make me feel like I have never done enough. So tell me something. What
Yes.
advice would you give anyone, especially a woman,
You
getting in law
know,
enforcement today?
it's so hard. It's so hard. I still am so passionate about law enforcement. And it's always been my dream, or I wouldn't have fought so hard to get it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have went from the medical field and being nice and comfortable to wanting to, go on the streets and help those who are at their worst moments and, wanting to do something for my community and be out there in the weather and, clearing out, homeless camps and doing whatever I could. It's hard because I want to think that there's still good in law enforcement, and I believe there truly is. I believe as women in law enforcement, there still isn't enough for us. I believe it's not equal. I believe it's still a man's job. I believe we're still treated like it's a man's place. Um, I think there's room to grow, but I don't know if the offices and agencies will ever let us. Um, and I'm not saying any of this because I'm bitter. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm a little angry. I guess I could say that. I'm still a little angry. I'm more disappointed. I'm more disappointed in the way everything was handled because I never thought it would be handled like this. I never thought that somebody could tell the absolute truth and go out of their way to prove it and could be shunned the way they have. I never thought that this was possible, when you work so hard to be such a great person. And I've seen a lot of deputies do a lot of bad things that are still there and haven't received a write-up. You know what I mean? Um,
Yes, I do.
it's and they're still there. You can only let a convicted murderer into the roofway and not get wrote up there. But, uh, yeah, no, it's really difficult to give advice. It's really difficult to give advice. I would say do it hard, do it with passion, do it to the best of your ability every single day, and know that this is a possibility.
Would you do it again?
I would do it in a heartbeat. I would even do it in a heartbeat for El Paso County. If Sheriff Roybal came to me today and stated, we were wrong. We were wrong. We did this wrong, and I'm sorry. I would do it again today. If he was to do something like that, do you know how many deputies at that jail and that work patrol right now would take a sigh of relief?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I kind of have an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, that would take integrity. a lot of it.
I don't think there is anything. I don't think there is any, and I can only see it getting worse. I can it's election year's coming up, you know? You need somebody in there that's gonna have a bit of integrity, and to allow these lies and this harm to people's families and to tear their lives apart for no reason. No reason.
You had a ton of integrity to stand against a system that, as you can see, when it goes against a person, and especially a person in law enforcement, they're zealous about how they go after you. That's what you did, took a ton of integrity. You know, you knew you were going to fall on your sword, and you did it anyway because for you, integrity is not a compromise.
The passion and the respect you need from the community has to be there. They have to trust you, and I know they don't trust Roybal. A group trusts Roybal. I know they never trusted Elder, or they wouldn't have had a whole website against them. You know, there's a reason for things,
Oh, I
but
know.
but you have to have the trust. You have to have the trust from your employees. When they're afraid to even peep a word, that's bad. Who else is gonna get harmed? Who else, and I mean physically. Do you even trust people with your life out there? You have to be able to trust them. My husband's a sheriff's deputy, and if that man comes to my door and tells me my husband's been shot, him and I are gonna have some issues.
That's right. That is absolutely right. But you know what? Bringing it to light, I think that is a protection in some way,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
am very honored for your trust. I am so, so sorry that you had to go through this.
Yeah, no, this is great. And we really just need to get the word out because we got to stop this. We're coming in a time where we just need to treat each other a little bit better and stop this. Stop this. This is ridiculous.
No, absolutely. Are you able to share at all what Deputy Matos, whether or not it was at least positive what she said in her Facebook message?
So when she messaged me, she was fired. She was terminated from El Paso County for no call, no shows. And she messaged me and she said, "Hey, I know I'm the last person you want to speak to, but I was terminated from El Paso County and I heard that you won in court and I was wondering if you could help me." I responded back with, I did not know that. I can tell you if you have FOP to contact FOP. They can help you or direct you in the right way. Other than that, I have nothing. I guided her into the right place, and that's all I could do. And I said no more. I said, "Have a good day."
Wow. That
Even,
is some
yeah,
integrity you have. That is crazy that you actually helped her.
yeah. And, through it all, it did turn out that she is gang involved. We did find that out. It was her baby's dad that was in the jail. She still is active with the Serenos. She made that very clear. She ended up getting her post through the Pikes Peak College, and one of somebody I know, somebody I know is an instructor there, and she was making comments about her family coming up from Florida and causing some injuries if anybody got on the wrong side of her and stuff like that. So it was all true. It was all there.
It's just that you didn't do it.
Nope. I had nothing to do with it.
I am so sorry, Kathy. Seriously, you're a great example of things that can go wrong, sadly, for somebody who did a, did it perfectly.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
Yep. It
When
still
people
haunts me to this day.
when
I
people
mean,
think it can't happen to them,
yeah.
it can.
Yep. Yep. It sure can. It sure can. I'm still dealing with it with, my last law enforcement job, that just ended because of them.
Yeah, and the story continues. Well, hopefully
Yeah.
this will get you at least personal justice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you
You're
so, so much for
yeah.
your trust, your time, your friendship. You've been wonderful. Um, and anything I can do, I'm right here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Whistle Shields podcast. I am your host, Claudia Aldrich. This podcast was created to give a voice to law enforcement officers who have been targeted by their own departments and forced to become whistleblowers. You can find Whistle Shields on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search for Whistle Shields. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Whistle Shields is a production of the Police Officers Whistleblower Network, all rights reserved.